Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here reporting to you from the new beautiful home that Hestia, goddess of the hearth, was kind enough to bless me with. As you can see, there's this beautiful skylight behind me which is just pouring the wealth of the sky into my lovely little lucky room. But today on a very different theme, I will be talking about the power of powerlessness as Mars has begun its transit in square to Neptune. So, naturally, in looking at the cosmology of the solar system at large, all of the planets represent different experiences we can go through that are essential in one way or another for our personal development. And the respective wills and designs and intentions of all the different planets sometimes harmonize and sometimes do not get along if they have very different modus operandi. And Mars to Neptune aspects are always awkward because they do not synchronize at all in terms of the experiences that they are seeking to give us. Mars, for instance, is perhaps best envisaged as being the knight errant of the ego. We may have particular desires, yearnings, tastes, or feelings in life that we want to see operative in the world, but it is Mars who is the warrior and goes out and gets them for us. Mars's job is to make us feel strong and capable and potent in the world, to believe that we have the raw strength and stamina and force of will and personality to make life conform to our wishes, to go out into the world and get more of what we want, and to structure such a life that we have the strength and potency to defend ourselves from anything that interrupts that process. So anytime we feel emboldened to take the initiative to pursue a course of action that will help us to acquire something we desire, that is when the fire of Mars is working through us, the part of us that feels that we can do something, that we have a raw power that we can harness to mold the world into the pattern of our desires and yearnings. And the planets that Mars is an aspect to can give us some idea about how we approach the problem of getting what we want. For instance, when Mars is an aspect to Venus, that's when we use our charm, our beauty, our elegance, and our social tact and finesse to know how to handle people in order to charm them into being willing to surrender to our own point of view. When Mars is an aspect to Mercury, that's when we use our intelligence, our cunning, our mercurial wit and inventiveness to make a situation more flexible to what we want from it. When Mars is an aspect to Jupiter, we use our wisdom, our understanding of the bigger picture of life, and our ability to channel that wisdom to, again, make things happen as we would wish them. However, this is not the case with Neptune, which rather than supporting our desire nature, has the habit of undermining it. And that is because Neptune is all about pulling us into the inner world, into the other world, into the imaginal world, into the realm of dreams that lurks within. And this is antithetical to the nature of Mars, because Mars is mostly concerned about shoring up power within the world. And that is largely the power that most of us are taught to seek on a day-to-day level. You know, some people are taught to make their bodies powerful, because the more powerful your body is, the stronger you are, the more things you are physically capable of doing in this world. Or to make ourselves, again, in that Venusian way, more beautiful, because the more beautiful we are, the more charming we can be to others. To maximize our intelligence, because the more intelligent we are, theoretically, the more ideas we will have to know how to deal with given scenarios. We're told all these different ways in which we could entrain ourselves to make ourselves more capable and adaptable to the struggles of survival and success that life brings our way. But if Neptune fights and undermines this process, it's because it realizes on a spiritual level that if we become too egoistically attached to our own power, to our own talent, to our own fertility and ability, then we can become so wrapped up in ourselves, in our own glory, in our own heroism, in our own conviction of our kingly might to do right by our own will, that we can become blind to the deeper aspects of reality. We can become blind to the fact that the ego, as is expressed in the Buddhist tradition, is just a myth, an illusion, a temporary form that we adopt for the sake of experiencing reality rather than a lasting, permanent thing in its own right. And when I talk about the ego like this as being a convenient fiction which gives us this focal lens through which we experience life, I often like to use the analogy of how we pick a given character or avatar when we are playing a video game. We pick a particular character, like when we're in a fighting game or some kind of adventure game, so that we can have a particular experience which only that character can offer us. And if we are playing one of those RPG games or fighting games, then we want to strengthen that character. We want to level it up. We want to have all the potions and skills and combos that make us most effective in the game of life that we're playing. And generally, if we are a martial person, we try and do that with ourselves as well, building up all the weapons and tools and resources that we need in order to reach the ultimate peak for which we are aspiring. However, if someone were playing a video game and identified too much with the character on the screen, to the point where they thought they were that character, and they said, that character I'm playing there on this video game console is me, we would think that person was crazy. We would think that person was deluded. And similar problems can arise as well if we become too attached to our ego as manifesting solely from our actions. Because we often do identify that way. We identify with our verbs. We identify with our doing. When we meet someone and we want to get to know them, very often the first question we'll ask is, what do you do? What do you do with your life? What job, what role, what agency do you have? You're not just here existing in the world as a being, you are someone who is making things happen. Justify yourself to us. Tell us what you're doing with your time alive. What are you contributing to the great melting pot of the world? But if we've fallen too much in love with our own power, with our own sense that we are able to take control of the world like a king and hold that orb and scepter and feel that it is truly our own, and whatever desire we have, we can translate into something manifest very quickly, we can end up becoming guilty of hubris. We can start to see ourselves as a god, and we can lose our humility, the reminder that within this finite universe, if anything does actually happen to support us, if anything actually does happen that supports and enables our will, it's only because the gods or the powers that are much greater than us are temporarily on our side. And Neptune can remind us of that very quickly, because it puts us in touch with those larger forces in life that we cannot control. Just as though, even though we've become so technologically advanced, we cannot control the ocean that Neptune represents. So Mars square Neptune makes me think of a long ocean voyage. When we are sailing along the sea, whilst we can progress and make distance over it according to the manpower that we put into it, that raw muscular martial strength, ultimately, how far we get, or how far we get set back, ultimately depends upon how benevolent or tricksy the ocean is feeling that day. If we are lucky enough to have harnessed a good wind, we can make a lot of progress. But if that wind suddenly disappears, we can find ourselves at standstill for a very long period of time and watching everyone wither and decay around us as we lose the resources necessary to sustain us. And it makes me think about that wonderful poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where exactly this scenario is described. This vigorous sea voyage with a gang of capable men heading out into the strange, uncharted territories of the ocean. But at some point, the titular mariner himself makes the mistake of hubris, of killing the albatross who was believed to make the winds blow. He transgressed and disrespected the divine power by identifying too much with his own power, and as such experiences this prolonged purgatory where the winds cease to blow and he watches all of those around him succumb to death in this strange state of morbid stagnation. This theme and problem is also highlighted repeatedly in Homer's Odyssey, where many of the times when Odysseus is thwarted or held back in his efforts to go home, to return to his native Ithaca after being away for so long during the Trojan War, occurs in response to times when he becomes too egoistic, where he believes that his power is his own rather than the blessings of the gods. And it is made clear throughout the Iliad and the Odyssey that Odysseus is great basically because he is favored by the goddess of the moon and the goddess of war and strategy, Athena, that she is the one who gives him his wisdom, who puts these great ideas and tactics and genius in his head, who has the power to refresh him and to embolden his muscles and to help him be reborn time and time again when he finds himself in these tricky situations. And what actually kickstarts his long journey home, which should have been straightforward, is when he disrespects Athena, when he disrespects the gods who've given him their blessing, and instead thinks that all of his greatness is because of himself. So when Mars is squaring Neptune, it can sometimes initiate frustratingly long periods where it feels like our will and the larger watery forces of the world that we are traveling over are not in our favor. When it felt like we were the charioteer taking charge of life and moving ever closer towards our goals, suddenly it feels like the oceans are turbulent or becalmed, or that we are just stuck in one place treading water. It's like the hanged man in the tarot, whereas rather than feeling like the powerful emperor or the charioteer who are able to have physical agency, instead we find ourselves in scenarios where everything is brought to this state of standstill. And for whatever reason, we cannot make things happen in the way that we are used to. But because we are disempowered in the outer world, the focus is really being asked to be drawn onto our inner world, into our emotional lives, into our dream lives. If we can't be so dramatic and heroic in the outer world, it's because we need to do more time exploring our inner world and getting into touch with those strange invisible realities that we live alongside all the time but often ignore in favor of the greater excitement out there offered to us out there. Now, we actually experienced this aspect relatively recently because of Mars retrograde, where it was in square with Neptune between September 16th to December 17th, 2023. And I remember this period because it was very difficult. I was in this state where I had a lot of crises and unresolved problems in my life that seemed to be demanding urgent action. And yet, for some reason, I was just continually stymied and prevented from taking any kind of meaningful response to these problems that needed resolution. I needed to find a new place to live. I urgently needed to find new work because I was running out of finances. I'd suffered lots of personal tragedies where a lot of people around me had either died or were sick, and it had basically brought me to this state of breakdown and depression where I was just so emotionally wrung out that I just lacked that martial fire to be able to respond to these things in any way. And if ever I tried, it was like a fly being swatted down, that you get back down to those sewers where you belong, you naughty girl. And this was very hard because the state that I was in probably made me a less pleasant person to be around, which caused the relationship I was in at the time to be brought to an end. And it just really felt that I was just being overwhelmed and unsupported by life in the worst possible way. And yet the result of having so much agency taken away from me in the outer world was that I had a lot more time just to give to myself and my soul and my inner world. For the years before that, and through lockdown, I had just been working flat out non-stop. My life was just this constant routine of being productive and staying in motion, to the point where my inner life had begun to become rather neglected and overcome with cobwebs. And it was only once I was forced to do nothing that I could actually start exploring that side of myself again. I could start exploring the spiritual world that I felt I had closed off from. But also, even though I was pretending to try and make things happen, to try and resolve all these problems, like I said, I was emotionally wrung out. And what I really wanted more than anything was just a bit of time to rest and recuperate and recover, so that I would eventually feel like I had the strength to be able to take charge of life and to go out and to greet those obstacles again, knowing that I had replenished the sense of hope and optimism that I needed in my heart to actually achieve these things. And it took a long time, but one of the byproducts of that period of kind of enforced isolation and stagnation and withdrawal from the world was that it made me want to dedicate more time to astrology, to spirituality, to stop seeing these things as being peripheral to my life, but remember that they were actually part of my deeper calling and of the things that make me feel like life is worth living at all. And it was actually during that period that I started to make this YouTube channel, which I am now enjoying so much and which does give me a sense of power and agency in the world. And this is where we see another side of Mars square Neptune. If we don't feel we can make our own projects and desires take flight during this square, it is one where instead we are encouraged to put our energies and resources towards helping other people, because Neptune is all about surrendering the ego and being more selfless, of sacrificing our own desires to help fulfill someone else's. So rather than just doing things solely for yourself and your own gratification, instead you make every action an offering to our higher cause. Rather than just doing something because it feels good to you and gratifies those animal urges, it becomes a gift that you are offering to the collective, to humanity as a whole, to the divine, to the gods, to anything that helps lure you out of the shallow trap of solely being concerned with yourself and your own survival. Anyway, as you can see, this is a complex aspect which I'm really struggled to articulate clearly. I'm running out of space here, so I'm going to have to do a second part to elaborate more fully on some of the other complex nuances of this aspect. But I hope you're all doing well and that you will share your own Mars Neptune experiences and stories with me. As I said in my last in my last video, I am available for astrological readings at the moment. If you are interested, I am trying to build up my astrological practice and just request a donation in return until things build up a bit more. For those of you who have reached out and messaged me already, I will get back to you. It's just I do juggle this alongside other jobs, and some of those are at night and mess with my sleeping schedule. But once I have enough energy to get back to you, I will, and all my love to you.